booster campaign. Not unsurprisingly, it predicts the same level of efficacy from the same boosters put into the same arms. Surely, in light of the data, that we're not going to continue with this absolute madness. Mr Deputy Speaker, if we were to perpetuate this, what we'll actually be doing is engaging in very expensive state-sponsored self-harm on a national level. Mr Deputy Speaker, in the winter of 2020, the experimental mRNA vaccines were announced to the British public as being safe and effective. That narrative was repeated by the Vaccine Minister in her response to my speech in this place on the 13th of December. It is interesting that today the NHS website describes the experimental vaccines as safe and important, and it describes serious side effects as being very rare. But the truth, as we know, is somewhat different. 1 in 800 is not rare, especially when the public is expected to take multiple doses, exposing themselves again and again to the same risk. Mr Deputy Speaker, the government needs to be honest about this, just like they need to be honest about the fact that the MHRA is funded 86% by Big Pharma. The experimental mRNA vaccines from the manufacturer's own trial data are not safe, with an average of 1 in 800 people taking them facing death or serious injury as a result. Despite the initial and repeated assurances, the experimental mRNA vaccines from the government's own data, they are not effective at preventing infection, transmission or hospitalisation from COVID-19. The experimental mRNA vaccines are not necessary given the risk-benefit of the treatment, and the experimental mRNA vaccines are costing the country a fortune and creating huge pressure on the NHS from the side effects. I would therefore ask the Minister, given that the data released on the 25th of January by the UK Health Security Agency was actually presented to the JCVI on the 25th of October 2022, why was the booster rollout not halted last October, given the clear lack of efficacy and the evidence of risks being greater than the benefit to all age groups, except possibly the over 70s, with underlying health conditions where the risk was absolutely identical? Was the data presented to the JCVI passed to the MHRA? If so, when? And if not, why not? Why were the MHRA still asking the government to authorise the experimental vaccines to be administered to children down to the age of 6 months of age in December 2022, 6 weeks after the booster efficacy data was received by the JCVI? If the data was not passed to the MHRA, the Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency, surely the JCVI should have spoken out against the vaccination of small children last December. I'm sure, Mr Deputy Speaker, that despite the members of the JCVI having declared an interest of over £1 billion between them of investments in Big Pharma, this would never have influenced their judgment. Can the Minister also confirm the fact that 2/3 of NHS staff refused last autumn's booster? The simple facts are that in light of the government's own data, COVID vaccinations and boosters are not effective, and from the evidence of the yellow card system, they're not safe, and to the UK taxpayer, they are not value for money. Indeed, given the side effects, Mr Deputy Speaker, if they were free, we couldn't afford them. The only ones who really benefit from the booster rollout are Big Pharma, with their licence to print money and indemnification against the harms of their products cause. Once again, Mr Deputy Speaker, Big Pharma have put profits before people, and on this occasion, governments across the globe have been their willing marketing agents. The whole COVID-19 narrative is slowly unravelling. As I believe I've demonstrated today, Mr Deputy Speaker, no one should have been boosted after the efficacy data was received on the 25th of October last year, and no one should be boosted in future based on that data. Given the evidence of harms by the boosters, I now believe that we have the full explanation of both the continuing excess deaths we've seen since the pandemic, 63,000 excess deaths in England and Wales in the last 12 months, and also the reason for the huge and unrelenting pressure of demand on the NHS. Mr Deputy Speaker, it's the vaccines and the boosters and their side effects. Sadly, I am confident that I'll be proved correct. I sincerely wish it was not so. But the longer it takes our government to accept the truth, the more people will be harmed and die. The first step to putting right a problem is always to admit there is a problem. The government narrative of safe and effective is in tatters, as evidenced by their own data. 3 months on from my original speech in this House, we have surely now sacrificed enough of our citizens' lives on the altar of ignorance and unfettered corporate greed to satisfy anyone. I therefore call on the Government to immediately stop the mRNA vaccine booster programme and initiate a full public inquiry into not only the vaccine harms, but how every agency and institution set up to protect the public interest have failed so abysmally in their duties. I look forward to the Minister's response. I'm aware that it's neither his area of responsibility or expertise, and I will accept that any questions he can't answer at the dispatch box today, that he will send to me in writing.
Minister Wilkins.
Well, thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And as the honourable gentleman says, I'm responding to the debate on behalf of the honourable member for Lewis. Vaccines have underpinned the government's strategy for living with COVID-19. They have saved tens of thousands of lives, reduced the pressure on our NHS, and were instrumental in allowing our economy and society to reopen. COVID-19 has not gone away, and thousands of people in the United Kingdom continue to be infected each week. Vaccines remain our best line of defence and the most effective way to enable us to live with the virus. Countless studies have shown that vaccinated people are less likely to die or become seriously ill from the virus. And thanks to the huge efforts of NHS staff and, of course, the public, as of the 5th of March, over 144 million vaccine doses have been provided in England alone. This includes over 17 million in the recent autumn booster campaign, which concluded last month. Now, the honourable gentleman specifically referred to the efficacy of the mRNA COVID-19 boosters. And it's important, Mr Deputy Speaker, to put on record that all of the vaccines used in the UK COVID-19 vaccination programme have been through a rigorous approval process. The UK has some of the highest safety standards in the world, and the independent Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, the MHRA, is globally recognised for requiring high standards of quality, safety and effectiveness. And the mRNA COVID-19 boosters approved for use in the United Kingdom have also been through similar rigorous approval processes by the EMA in Europe and the FDA in the United States. And each potential COVID-19 vaccine is assessed by teams of scientists and clinicians on a case-by-case basis. There are extensive checks and balances required by law at every stage of vaccine development, and it is only once each potential vaccine has met robust standards of quality, safety and efficacy set by the MHRA that it will be approved for use. Now, both the mRNA and non-mRNA vaccines have already been administered as booster doses, with the majority of doses administered in the recent autumn booster being mRNA vaccines. And data shows that COVID-19 boosters have been highly effective in reducing hospitalisations and death, with the mortality rate consistently lower for people who have had at least a third dose or booster dose, compared with individuals who are unvaccinated or received just a first or second dose. Earlier this month, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Office for National Statistics published their latest COVID-19 effectiveness estimates. They showed between March 21 and March 22, a third booster dose was approximately 93% effective in reducing the risk of mortality from COVID-19, compared to 58% for a first dose and 88% for a second dose, and 77% effective in reducing the risk of hospitalisation, compared to 52% for a first dose and 55% for the second dose. This highlights the effectiveness of all COVID-19 vaccinations and shows that protection only increases following a third dose or booster, as supported by other extensive research, such as the UK HSA surveillance reports. And the most recent data from UK HSA on the autumn 22 booster campaign showed that the mRNA bivalent boosters provided incremental protection against hospitalisations on top of the protection already provided by previous doses in the period following the 5th of September 22. It also showed that the effectiveness against hospitalisation remained high at 10 or more weeks after vaccination, which was vital in supporting the NHS over a particularly challenging winter period. Now, the honourable gentleman also raised the ongoing vaccine surveillance, and the surveillance of vaccines does not stop at the point of approval. The MHRA and the UK Health Security Agency continuously monitor a wide range of data regarding the safety and effectiveness of the vaccines, including reports, as the honourable gentleman pointed out, of adverse reactions from the UK and internationally. And as part of this surveillance, the MHRA's monitoring role includes reviewing all suspected adverse drug reaction reports, known as yellow card reports, relating to COVID-19 vaccines. And through that MHRA yellow card scheme, members of the public and healthcare professionals are able to report any suspected side effects. And the nature of yellow card reporting means that reported events are not always proven side effects. Some events may have happened anyway, regardless of vaccination. Now, this comprehensive surveillance strategy alerts us to any unforeseen adverse reactions to the vaccines and enables us to act swiftly when required. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Government is also committed to further research into COVID vaccines, and since the start of the pandemic, the National Institute for Health Research, the NIHR, has allocated more than £110 million in funding for COVID-19 vaccine research, and that has included consideration of vaccine safety, including robust monitoring of adverse reactions to COVID-19 vaccines. So in summary, Mr Deputy Speaker, we know that the COVID vaccination programme has saved tens of thousands of lives and has prevented many more from being hospitalised. The Government has recently announced that a targeted seasonal vaccination offer will come in England on the 17th of April, which will top up the protection of those at the highest risk. Vaccination of residents in older adult care homes will start ahead of this from Monday the 3rd of April. And the primary aim, Mr Deputy Speaker, of the spring programme continues to be the prevention of severe disease, hospitalisations and, of course, death. And older persons, residents in care homes for older adults and those who are immunosuppressed continue to be at highest risk of severe COVID-19 and therefore prioritised for vaccination. Mr Deputy Speaker, the COVID vaccine programme is something of which this country can be very proud, and I would like to reiterate my thanks to the scientists, clinical staff, volunteers and others who helped make this happen.
Questions of this House do now adjourn. As many of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it.